So today we've got Robin Hayhurst on the podcast. Really excited to have you here. Robin is a business mentor for construction business owners. Really happy to have you here today.
It's great to be here.
Robin, I'd really love to hear a bit more about your journey from the early days of sort of working in your family business to ultimately starting your business mentorship business. Take us back to sort of the early days and how you got into construction.
Oh, well, that was a long time ago. So I was trying to work it out the other day, and because I started really early, it was kind of 40 years plus. So I started out really visiting sites with my dad. He had a construction and development business, and I remember kind of driving around in the car on a Sunday, looking at the sites, which was, I complained about it a lot of the time. And I started working for him when I was about 10, which I'm sure we must have been breaking some rules back there. I most probably drove my first dumper when I was about 12. He wasn't on site. I think his site managers just like to see me kind of enjoy myself really. I started back then. I really worked with him in all my holidays and everything else up until about the age of 17, 18 when I worked full time, and then I moved on and worked for another company really from the age of about 18 and got the experience there.
And what would you say are some of the major lessons that you learned from actually working with your dad and running a construction business and being surrounded by that?
Don't be the boss's son. That's one thing. It was about people really, and how some people are very dedicated to what they do and some people are just there to do a job. And also it's interesting seeing that when a business grows, and his business grew substantially, you lose control. You can lose control. And if you have 70 people working for you, ultimately some of them aren't going to be very good. And I think making sure that you keep a very high standard when you build your team is really, really important. But the main thing was my father became my first ever mentor, and I found that really important, and he imparted his core values on me. And I still believe in the core values that he imparted on me, and he most probably didn't know they were core values, but it's just what he believed in. Things like win-win and being honest and treating people fairly were all things that he really believed in and was quite important. But the other thing, of course, was getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, cycling to site when you're kind of 12, 14. Not a lot of my mates were doing that kind of thing. So it just got me used to kind of getting up and getting stuck in, really.
So you obviously worked in the construction sector almost all of your professional life, right? Across the different businesses you worked for, what are the common challenges that you see business owners face when it comes to growing a business?
I've worked for so many different companies, some small, some very large, people like Countryside, Beezer, and small companies that aren't around anymore. I think the biggest challenges were really getting everyone working as a team. I think as companies grow, politics gets in the way, and people start fighting against each other and trying to outperform or not. And I think that really is the biggest challenge that I've seen, kind of looking at companies which literally fall apart because they've got two directors who are kind of almost at war, and their whole teams are joining in. And there is this team spirit of getting the job done. And that is so dangerous as you grow a company.
So from watching some of your content online, you do talk a lot about the 4 Ps and how that's important for business owners. Could you expand a little bit more on that and why it actually is important for businesses?
Yeah, and I'll be honest, it's not my invention entirely. Someone else came up with the 3 Ps. I added one on. But basically, it's about product, people, process, and profit. And profit comes last in my 4 Ps, because if you get the other 3 right, you'll make a profit, and you've got to concentrate on the other 3. So you've got to be building the right product. So for your clients, quality, everything else is really, really important. And you need process. Process is your friend in construction, and it makes sure that you're consistent and that your team gel, and that if you have an off day, you don't have an off day. And then you've got your people. People is some of the biggest mistakes that I've made in my career, is really employing the wrong people. And so the right people are really, really important. So if you get those 3 right, the chances are you'll be making a profit.
So we often meet construction business owners who are sort of burnt out, are still doing a lot of the manual admin themselves, and essentially carrying the whole company on their shoulders. What's your advice for them to kind of step out from the business and actually start to work on the business, not purely in the business? And yeah, what would be your advice on sort of helping them move out of that stage?
It's a hugely difficult thing to do, because when you're in the business and it's not going quite right, it's creating a lot of work for you, getting dragged into the business. I actually would recommend, but I would do that anyway, work with a mentor, because even if you can get away for one day a month and just work on your business, you're going to start moving forward. You need to get some help, but it's that kind of catch-22. Most people can't afford help, the kind of help they need, yet they need it to get out of the situation they're in. So luckily at the moment, the CITB are funding a lot of help for construction business owners, which has been really useful, particularly for what I call SMEs, the smaller businesses. So you can get help, you just got to make the time to go and look for it.
And on that topic as well, so, a big thing being a business owner myself is that we spend a lot of time outside of your typical work hours working on the business. What would be a few practical steps that you would advise business owners to do to actually start to reclaim their evenings and weekends so that they can actually spend more time with their families?
Well, I don't really believe in work-life balance. If you run your own business, you will have to work some weekends, you have to work some evenings. But don't be worried when you kind of take an afternoon off to see your kids play or to go and do something else, for you. So you've got to have that, that blend. So rather than kind of get really het up about I don't work past 5 o'clock on, I don't work at weekends, that's going to be so restrictive to you, it's actually going to cause you more stress than it solves. So it's really important to not feel guilty, to take an afternoon off for yourself, to take some time out in the day for yourself, knowing that you might have to work at weekends. Now, I wouldn't say you need to do that for the rest of your working life, but if you're building a business, before you kind of get to the point where you've got a really good team around you and you're spreading the load, you're going to have to do it to be successful.
Construction coaches sometimes get a bad rep, right? And obviously you refer to yourself as a business mentor, not a coach. Why do you think it's really important that construction business owners have a mentor or a coach? And why specifically it's important that person is actually from the industry and has actually built a business in construction?
Coaching, mentoring is what I call a big ticket business. People have a lot of money doing it. So people just go into it and they might do a 2, 3, 4-week course and then become a business mentor. You're not going to get as much off them as you are someone who's actually been there, done it, made the mistakes, really importantly. They're going to give you some value, but they're not going to give you the kind of value that you need. I mean, in 2005, I went out looking for a business mentor or coach for myself. And the company, I knew we needed to change something. I didn't know what. At the end of the day, you don't know what you don't know. And I couldn't find anyone, not in my industry. Ended up with what I call a generic coach who just did business from a large franchise. And they didn't understand the industry, really didn't understand the industry. So they kind of fell back on trying to teach me marketing. Well, that's not what I needed. Our marketing was okay. At the time, we were selling houses and it was going fine and our house was really good. So it's really important to get that help because it fast tracks you going forward. And you've got to remember our industry, there's 40% of all companies in our industry don't make a profit and 1 in 5 go bust every year. So, from that background, you've got to say, well, why is it so high in our industry? And I think it's because of the way we form businesses and where we come from. Often we're a professional or trade background, and then we form a business and go, right, okay, but someone taught you your profession if you're a site manager, and someone taught you your trade if you're a carpenter. Who's taught you to run a business? And that's why the failure rate is so high, because it's a completely different skill set. You can learn it, but if you don't know it, you don't know it.
So for a construction business owner listening today, what are 3 habits or practical steps that they can actually take this week to start to improve things in their business?
It's difficult to kind of break it down in that way, But what I would say is that our industry is not seen as very professional. So think about when you interact with clients, actually just doing what you should be doing, which is replying to them in good time, actually having a decent conversation. If they email you, email them back. Don't stick your head in the sand. I mean, that's something you can do straight away. And every time you write a letter to a client, template it. So after a while, you're going to get a kind of group of letters that you can send to clients that you don't have to rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. There'll be one that suits your requirements at the time. And by having templates, you save yourself so much time. So if you do that, the other thing is think about money. Okay, we don't, generally in the industry, we're all trying to get over the end of the month. We're going to get enough money coming in. You've got to really have a much longer approach to think about money. So you could be thinking about 6 months in advance. So it's a difficult thing to do if you don't know how to do it. So cash flow forecasting is really important. And finally, you've got to understand your costs on site. So you need some form of software or spreadsheet to make sure that you understand where you're spending money on site and where you're going over budget. Because if you don't understand where you're going over budget, how can you change anything? So that's a really, really important part of it. And so many companies don't. They might know their total cost on site. They can't break it down. So they don't know if the first fix timber's gone over price, or you've got the the plumbing's gone over price. They don't know. They just know the total cost on site.
So one of the things that I've seen you speak about is the customer journey, and that's a really interesting concept or topic, because I think most construction companies are focused on what they're doing internally. Can you kind of give us a brief breakdown of what that means?
Of course I do. Of course I can, sorry. The client's journey is really, really important. We've got to think about our clients in a different way. So we've got to manage them and not have them manage us. I think we do get this wrong, and it's a very low bar to be good in this industry. So if you implement a proper client's journey strategy, you're actually going to be far above anyone else. So what does that entail? Well, firstly, who are you going to work with and who aren't you going to work with? Make a list. The kind of jobs you want, the kind of jobs you don't. Have a standard letter going out saying that you're actually going to bid on something or you're not going to bid on it, so that you can reply promptly. Have a idea of how long it's going to take you to make that decision about whether you're going to bid or not. Then you move on and think about the actual tender process. Are you going to have a pre-tender meeting? So it's ideal to have one if you can, to make sure that you really understand what they're after. So that's really important. And have you got an agenda for that? Then you've got a post-tender meeting where you try to value engineer. And then you've got a pre-start meeting. All these can have templates. And the pre-start meeting is really about managing your client's expectations all the way through the build, right into the handover. So we map out this journey as a flow. We give our clients all the templates so they can put it in days as a system. And it is game-changing. It's not complicated, but it is game-changing.
Great. And could you just give us an example of a client that you've worked with that started to implement some of these processes and how it's actually had a real impact on their business? Don't have to mention any names.
Well, I have numerous clients that have put this stuff in, and they've kind of gone from... If you speak to my clients directly, they'll say that I've given the confidence to build the company because the processes have given them confidence they're doing things right. And I think particularly the client's journey, but also all the other things I do with people, you're cutting out 90% of the problems you have with clients. This cuts out variation problems. It cuts out problems with clients not paying on time, clients chasing you. Because you're coming over as a professional and you're managing their expectations, it cuts out all those problems. So you imagine running your business, take away 90% of your client problems. What are you going to do with that time?
So thank you, Robin, for coming on the podcast today. If our listeners want to connect with you, learn more about what you do, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Most probably just go on the website, which is obviously www.robinhayhurst.com. So that's the best way to connect with me. I'm also on Instagram and most platforms really. And yeah, I think the website's the best port of call, really.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Really enjoyed our conversation.